And so this process called interphase, that is where everything has replicated and it's ready to begin this process of being pulled apart. We go then through mitosis. The nuclear membrane has to break down, so the DNA has to get out of the middle of the nucleus. So the nuclear membrane breaks apart. We've got our spindle fibers. We've got our spindle fibers here that are each attached to the centriole, and this centriole is going to the North Pole. This centriole is going to the South Pole. The X's are all lining up here along the equator, and they're getting ready for half of them to go one direction and half of them to go the other direction. So then the nuclear membrane is completely dissolved. Everything gets lined up here right before metaphase in prophase, so this period where the nuclear membrane's breaking apart. Everything's in its X's and the poles are going the two directions. Then we go through metaphase, and metaphase is where we've got our equator. We've got our North Pole and our South Pole, and the chromosomes are lined up and getting ready to be ripped apart. And the next, right after metaphase, is when we go into anaphase. Anaphase is where they have actually been ripped apart and they're getting pulled towards the poles. We've got one full set of chromosomes that are going one direction and the other full set of chromosomes going towards the other direction. Then we go into telophase, where the cell begins to actually split into two. And we've got half of our chromosomes on one side, the other half of the chromosomes on the other side. The nuclear membrane begins to form around those chromosomes. So where there had been no nuclear membrane before, during anaphase, we've got the nuclear membrane that's forming again during telophase, and the cell is beginning to pinch in two during cleavage formation. And then finally, we get our complete pinching off, and the two daughter cells are going to go their two separate ways. And cytokinesis, as you can imagine, when you go from one big parent cell and you split into two, you're going to have all the parent cell is going to become half of the size. So the cytoplasm is going to begin to make more of itself to make two full-size cells, and so that's basically where the cell is building itself so that it can be equal to the parent cell. So when we have this process happening out of control, that's where we get things like cancer coming into play. So cancer is unrestrained cell growth and division. If you think about what you know of cancer, when people find out they have cancer, they usually find some kind of tumor. In breast cancer, women find lumps. Well, men can also get breast cancer. When you have these tumors, you have these abnormal formations of cell growth and division where they're sucking the resources out of the individual. And it is the second leading cause of death in the United States. I think it's 20% of all deaths in the United States happen because of cancer. And the leading killer of people in the United States is heart disease, which is hereditary, passed on from parents to offspring. So cancer is on the rise, but ways to treat cancer is also on the rise. This is what it looks like when a cell is going through cancer. If you were to take and grow normal cells in a petri dish, they would keep dividing until they bounce up next to one another. And at that point that they reach the other cells, the cells begin communicating with one another, and they say, hey, we're right next to each other, stop dividing. And so they just make a thin, even layer, and when cells come into contact with one another, they stop dividing. Cancer cells, on the other hand, when they come into contact with one another, they don't recognize that they're right next to another cell. And so they ignore this signal that they're right next to another cell, and they continue to divide, basically piling up onto one another. And that's what makes for a tumor. So here, if we've got our normal cells, one parent cell becomes two daughter cells. Then as each of these become parents, they divide into 2, and they divide into 4, divide into 8, until eventually the normal cells are no longer able to divide, and they have this like a normal pattern of growth, and they stop growing. That doesn't happen in cancer cells. As the cancer cells grow and divide, they don't do so at a normal rate because they don't recognize each other as other similar cells. So they continue to divide indefinitely. They can divide forever and ever and ever until they overwhelm the host. That's why people that get cancer often get so weak at the later stages in their life, because tumor cells like this are just going to suck the energy and suck the resources out of the organism, and they are going to continue growing out of control, making these tumors bigger and bigger and bigger. And it says here the membranes of cancer cells tend to have reduced adhesiveness. Adhesiveness is this process of being sticky. So they stick to each other less than do non-cancerous cells. So whereas normal cells make these nice little patterns, these cancer cells just keep growing out of control and make these big tumors, and they will grow forever until they overwhelm the host. So piling on top of one another.